Alrighty folks, this is Lurch from Airline Gaming and welcome back to another episode of From the Depths. I am very happy to say that the CRAM cannons have very recently went to the stable branch, so they're there for everyone to play with, and some people might be befuddled as to what they do, how to work them, and how it all fits together. So I'm here to give a couple of examples, a quick rundown of how the parts work, and show you some of the basic building tricks that I've worked out so far. So without further ado, let's get started. The first and most important block to the CRAM cannons is the firing piece. This is essentially your cannon controller, and you can attach this to a 6-way connector. The 6-way connectors are more or less the skeletal structure of your cannon, and you can use this to attach additional components. You can enter the Q menu on the firing piece to see more details on what the cannon does and set firing restrictions and these other details. I'll cover these later in the video. Next up, we have the autoloader. The autoloader is the thing that you will use to attach other components to, such as ammo boxes and warheads. This is how you connect them here. They attach to the sides of the loader, and if you look at the little connectors, the green connectors here, you can see the large trumpet connectors are for attaching to the 6-way connectors, and the little bullet tips at the top left and right at this current orientation are what you attach your ammo clips or your ammo boxes and the warheads to. Personally, I always use the manual place orientation. You can use the auto place loader and it will automatically orientate itself in such a way. You can actually see whenever you're placing these, the little red boxes, and that shows you faces that you cannot attach to. Just something to note, these little building indicators are in an awful lot of pieces and they're well worth looking out for because they make it a lot easier to build things. These are the various things that you can attach to your autoloaders. Ammo boxes are essentially an ammo storage mechanism and allow you to feed ammo into the thing and allow it to shoot. Having ammo boxes connected to loaders also reduces your reload time and makes it faster to fire the cannon, which is again pretty useful. These other blocks are warheads, and they allow you to customize your shell. If we look at the CRAM cannons menu, we have the ammo boxes here, and these are all conveniently arranged so that you can see which ones attach. We also have fragmentation pellets that add fragmentation shells, or fragmentation properties to your cannon. We have high explosive, we have EMP, and we have hardener pellets that are essentially for higher AP and kinetic damage. You can attach loads of these, you can mix them, you can make different shell types, and they all contribute to how the cannon actually works whenever it fires and what the shells do. Next up, we're going to have a look at a couple of the different ways that you can connect these pieces together. I found this to be a very effective orientation for making 5x5 cannons. This particular way of putting them, this way, allows me to get more autoloaders connected to the same, like a smaller number of components. The warheads are a particularly expensive part of the build, like high explosive are 1400 RP, EMPs 400, hardeners 400, and they make up the bulk of the cost. So making the most out of these parts and connecting them to as many autoloaders as possible is a great way to benefit highly from these different parts. If we look at the cannon here, and the advanced cannon list, or the information screen here, if you look at the 5th box down in the scary information screen, we'll see 200 ammunition in one box. Each shell uses 7 ammo, 0 explosive material boxes, 0 hardening material boxes, 2.5 EMP material boxes, and 4.5 fragment material boxes. If we look here, we actually only have 1 of each. The fragment gets 4 because it's connected to 4 autoloaders. When a warhead is connected to multiple loaders, it gives the full benefit of 1 per loader that it is attached to. You also get an additional 0.5 just for having it connected to the cannon. You can attach these, and we will attach a high explosive here as an example. You'll see we have got 0.5 explosive material boxes added just for having this connected to a 6-way. This is obviously a very inefficient way of building your cannons. With this one, we have 2.5 attached to the cannon. This is because we get 1 for each autoloader, and again 0.5 for having it connected to the cannon. So building your cannons efficiently can help to reduce your RP cost and get a sort of a more powerful profile in a smaller box. I find this particular layout to be quite an effective way of getting the most out of a small footprint. This, when mounted vertically, will give you a 5x5 box, or a 5x5 cannon that will rotate within a 5x5 box, as long as you leave the 4 corners missing. I'm going to be showing you an example of how to build this vertically in a proper cannon later in the video. If we look at some of the additional parts that we have, this one is a target predictor. Let's go get Rambot. Where are you, son? Oh, you're standing on the barrel still. We'll go over here and hop up here and take control of this cannon. This block on the left is a target predictor, which allows you to see the trajectory of the shell whenever you fire. And we have a dinky little barrel here. This thing's only got a tiny amount of things connected to it. But yeah, that lets you see a rough trajectory of where the shell's going to land if you want to fire the cannon manually. Kind of useful little block. This one next is for setting a fuse time. It's a laser targeter, exactly the same as the one in the advanced cannons. You have to use these with a fuse block, and we're going to look at that now. This is a fusing box. Unlike the advanced cannons, you don't have to configure these in a shell customizer, so you can just add as many fuses as you want. But bear in mind that each fuse uses 25% of your shell's payload. So it can severely nerf the shell, but you can also get massive benefits. For 25% you get a penetration depth fuse, which can make or break a cannon and make it extremely powerful if you have the right configuration. But I'm going to leave that up to you guys to play with and see, what you can come up with. Next, I think it's time to look at Nunu here. No, not Nunu from the popular MOBA game League of Legends. This is Nunu from the Teletubbies. Go look it up. This is just an example of how the gauge increasers work. If you remember in the past, the old custom cannons just had a single gauge increaser block you could attach to a connector, and they all had to be attached to connectors. Now we have these 4 beautiful little blocks that allow you to do some pretty cool aesthetics, as you see up there with the funky little head that I've built for this guy. This is the gauge increase corner. We also have a top block. We also have a standard gauge increase block. And we have a port that looks really quite cool. These are a great way to add a little bit of personality to your cannons. They have a great steampunk feel to them and they look absolutely awesome. I've actually built one over here. Let's have a quick look at this cannon. And you can see, I've got ports built into the back and sides, and it's got a nice slopey top on here with an interesting little ridge on the top. It really adds a lot of character to these cannons, and they look absolutely brilliant, I think. Really great props to the dev team for this one. They look absolutely stunning. Next up, we'll have a quick look at the barrel, or different barrel variants that are available. This one on the end is your standard barrel. It's a dinky tiny version. This particular cannon is about 1.5 meter diameter. It's a pretty big shell. But the more barrels you have, the more accurate your cannon is, and the higher the shell velocity is. If you look at the stats on the right for each cannon part, it will tell you roughly what each cannon part does, or each barrel segment. The recoil suppression barrel, which is this one here, we'll look at the stats, has an accuracy modifier, makes it more accurate. Muzzle velocity change reduces your muzzle velocity, so it slows down your shell, and it reduces your recoil as well. Each one also reduces your firing angle. And we have the motor driven and elevation barrel to help with that later on. The flash suppression barrel, it reduces your muzzle flash and makes your cannon quieter. And it has a recoil modifier to help lower your recoil a little bit as well, but it also slows down the shell. This is the flash suppression barrel. Looks nifty. This one here is the motor driven barrel, and it has an accuracy modifier, a very small one. It makes it a little bit more accurate. It also has a small recoil modifier, so it gives you more recoil. The elevation barrel is for giving you vertical motion, and it's for using it more like an AA gun. I honestly can't recommend that for these particular cannons. The elevation is very, very slow. Let's go get Rambot again, and I'll just show it off. This is a very high gauge cannon, and if we look at the actual tracking speed of that barrel, it is really quite slow. So these cannons are pretty ponderous and scary. They shoot very, very low velocity shells. I mean, this one's only 117 meters per second. Let's shoot one here, see what it does. It's very low angle. And yeah, it does an awful lot of damage. But that brings me on to one of the more interesting things about these cannons. As they reload, or as they sit idle, if you look at the shell stats, you can see our explosive damage is rapidly rising. The idea behind these is that the longer they wait before they fire, up to a certain maximum, they pack more and more and more explosive bits, or relative shell components, into the cannons. And when you fire, you get the full benefit the longer you leave it. Now this brings me on to these settings. Now the maximum cannon gauge is fairly self-explanatory. This lets you set a particular gauge for your cannon, and it will never go higher than this, regardless of how many gauge attachers you add. Kinda handy if you want to have a very, very specific value. The minimum packing time is the minimum amount of time your cannon is allowed to wait before firing. So if we set this to 30 seconds, even if the cannon is reloaded, and you'll see our reload time at the top is 14.45 seconds, that is the absolute minimum, but limited to 30 seconds between shots. So it's going to artificially hold onto its shell until 30 seconds have passed, and allow it to mount up to be a little bit more powerful. Then whenever it does fire, it's really going to blow up some crap. The density is showing there below the damage. It says 5.7 after 85 seconds. This has been sitting for quite a while not firing. The density level gets to a maximum of 100, but it's going to be a long time before this teeny tiny cannon reaches that. So you're going to have to build something pretty substantial to get that density up to 100 in any reasonable amount of time. I think it's about time to start building something now that I've introduced all of the different shell parts, or different cannon parts, sorry. So I'm going to cut here, clear up this deck a little bit, and start building a new cannon. We'll start with a 3x3. I'm going to show exactly how I built this guy. Alright, I've done a little bit of tidying up on the platform, and let's build ourselves another one of these cannons that you see beside me here. We want to start off with a one-axis turret. And the first thing I normally do on a new turret is put a little metal ring around the bottom just to give it a little bit more resistance against turret pop. Now, the beauty of this design is it's sort of scalable upwards as far up as you want it to go. So I'm going to use 6 blocks to get it upwards, so it's 6 tall, and we're going to pop a firing piece on here. And I want to leave one band here to allow clearance for whenever the the cannon is above the deck. The hull of the ship I want to start at about here. So the first thing we're going to do after now is go and put a little ring around here, and that sort of signifies the size of our turret. And anything on top is going to be like gauge increasers and barrel parts, because the great thing about the gauge increasers with the CRAM cannons is their health and armor is more or less the same as that of metal. I think it's got slightly less health, but it's very light as well, and they are more expensive, but it does mean that keeping them, visible on top of your ship isn't really heavily penalized, so you can make really cool looking turrets. So let's get on with it, and we want to put autoloaders on the inside here. Oops, misclick. And we'll use the manual ones. Now, the way I want these orientated is I'm going to have the ammo barrels or ammo boxes and the shells down the back here. So I want these to be attaching on both sides. That means that we get 2 for every 1 autoloader that we have. Like 2 attachment points. So let's do this quickly. And we'll put them down there, and I'm using tab to hold that and then just rotate it around that axis. Okay, nice and simple. Now we want to fill in the little gaps. We're just going to use high explosive again. Because we've got symmetry on, that's all filled up nicely, and we'll pop a couple of ammo boxes. Now this is an extremely simple little turret. Really very, very little to it, and we built it in a matter of seconds. All we need to do now is add a couple of gauge increasers. Let's see, increase port. I'm going to make this sort of something similar to the other one quickly. And the genius that I am, I've just realised I've made it one too tall. Brilliant. Okay. Well, no, this isn't a problem. We can just have a higher turret, and we can have an extra metal band around here. In fact, no, well, let's just add more bloody loaders. Let's just, yeah. Very simple to add extra stuff, so... add them, shift replace. There. Done. Dusted. There we go, we've now got slightly more firepower than we did on the other turret. The last thing we need to add are barrels. The sort of configuration of these is sort of important. I kind of like to use a couple of motor barrels and then a couple of regular barrels and then an elevation barrel on the end. And the way these motor barrels work is they kind of offset the penalty to your firing arc for having more barrels. The more barrels you add, the more reduction there is to your elevation firing arc. So if we grab another motor driven barrel and add it on here, we've now got 22.5 elevation arc. We add another one, 45 degree elevation. And that means that we can fire, aim the turret up 45 degrees. The barrel also indicates the speed of the shell. So if you see at the minute we have 169 meters per second. If we go a bit longer, we have 175, and our accuracy should have dropped as well. And there it is at the 0.44. So a lot of the configuration comes down to your actual barrels, which is kind of interesting because aside from your fire rate, it's a sort of an independent system, which is, well, quite nice. You can tell how the thing works straight away. But that is a very simple way to build a 3x3 turret, and this sort of configuration, if you want, you can put hardeners. Now we have an AP cannon. We want to put frags. Look, now we have a frag cannon. And that's one of the beauties of this new CRAM system. They're extremely simple, very easy to build, and, they're actually very effective as well. Before we wrap up, I'm going to build a 5x5 variant and show you sort of a nice little way that I figure out of building them. So I'll be right back. Okay, so we've started out with our little local weapon controller and our turret ring again. I'm just going to speed this build up though, so off we go. Okay, so how's that look? We now have a 200mm cannon, and it's got about a 17-second reload time, which is pretty long, but it should do a fair bit of damage when it hits stuff. I'm probably going to fill in, actually, just do this quickly. Just to fill in, make the most of these little gaps, and we're going to put ammo boxes here because they're less explosive than high explosive boxes. It's in the name. So yeah, now we have a nice little 5x5 turret. The thing about 5x5s is they only rotate if the corner space is free. So let's go back to the hull, and we need to leave these corner spaces free. This one, this one, this one, and this one. But it will rotate exactly within a 5x5 box, which is really cool. Oh, I jumped. I didn't mean to jump. That's fine. We can get in here. And you can see this one can go all the way around, all nice and lovely like. Wonder what would happen if I just sort of... Oh, I missed. That's a shame. But yeah, that's a nice design for a 5x5 CRAM cannon. I'm not sure if this particular one is like 100% efficient in resource points, but we do get a lot of autoloaders connected to ammo boxes, and we make the most of the ammo boxes that we have by sharing them with as many loaders as possible. These particular boxes are shared with 4 loaders each, except for the ones in the top and bottom, because we need space for the connectors. But yeah, that is a quick look at the CRAM cannons, how to build them, and a couple of basic examples. I really hope you enjoyed the video. Any likes, subs or comments are really awesome. I love hearing from you guys, and I read every single comment. As always, take it handy, and have a bloody good day.